Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Greg Kihlström. Greg is a best-selling author, speaker, and entrepreneur. He is currently CEO and co-founder at CarrierGig. After selling his award-winning digital experience agency, Carousel 30, in 2017, he has worked with some of the world's top brands, including AOL, Choice Hotels, Coca Cola, Dell, FedEx, GEICO, Marriott International, MTV, Starbucks, Toyota, and VMware. He currently serves on the University of Richmond's Customer Experience Advisory Board, was the founding chair of the American Advertising Federation's National Innovation Committee, and served on the Virginia Tech Pamplin College of Business Marketing Mentorship Advisory Board. Greg's newest book, The Agile Workforce 2021, explores the current and future state of the workforce and envisions a world where individuals thrive in a new world of work opportunities enabled by technology, decentralization, and a shift in the power dynamics between employers and employees. His previous book, The Center of Experience 2020, talks about how customers and employee experiences can be operationalized into a cohesive brand experience. So, without further delay, plug your earphones in, sit back, relax, and let's jump right into this conversation with Greg. Welcome, Greg.
Oh, thanks so much. Looking forward to talking with you.
Awesome. Okay, Greg, could you share with us a little bit about your journey? Your bio was extremely extensive, and I said, I'm just going to pick out key parts of it and let Greg do the sharing. Just connect with the audience and just tell us how it is that you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I've played a few different roles over my career, and depending on how you look at it, I've been a freelancer, an employee, entrepreneur, executive, so on and so forth. Also, I've played roles in creative, marketing, technology, and what I've tried to do throughout my career. I mean, some of that is I like to learn new things, and so I constantly try to challenge myself to learn them. But some of it also is I thrive when I'm able to find connections between whether it's different disciplines or industries or things like that. And so I've always just tried to. At first, it wasn't so intentional. I'll confess, but towards getting a little few years down in my career, it started to become more intentional. That I always wanted to kind of push myself and be a little bit uncomfortable. Like if I was too comfortable, it meant that I wasn't learning enough and I wasn't pushing myself to do more than I was currently doing. So I started a marketing agency. First job was working at a startup. I became head of product design there back in the early 2000s. Started a marketing agency that I grew and eventually sold about 3 years ago. Did a lot in the digital experience space and for a number of those brands that you mentioned, and also quite focused in the financial services industry towards the end before I sold it. And then after that, really got more and more involved in the employee experience, leadership's role in the employee experience, and HR technology. And where I currently am, CarrierGig really flowed pretty naturally through that, where I just kept seeing more and more emphasis being placed on the freelance economy, the gig economy, but there was a lot of things that weren't really being solved for, and so I just found a new challenge to try to solve.
All right. So your book, agility, is one of those words that we've been hearing bouncing around for quite a few years now, but I definitely have heard it way more since the pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit about what the book is about? Who is it for? How will it help organizations? Is it geared towards a particular industry? And how can any company, or is it specific to an industry in terms of benefiting from an agile workforce?
Sure. Yeah, it's really geared. It's quite broad in scope as far as industry goes. But yeah, so the Agile Workforce, it's part of a series of books that I've written on the topic of agility in business. And so I started out focused more on the branding and marketing aspect and how to be more agile in those types of approaches. And it's over time. I also started a podcast called The Agile World. Just you can see a theme developing here. I'm 4 books into this series and have a podcast all talking about how do we position ourselves to be adaptive and resilient in a constantly changing world. And there's recent events with the pandemic certainly draw attention to the need for that. But it's always been the case that we need. That we need to be agile. So, the latest book, The Agile Workforce, is really talking about this growing independent workforce where, 10 years ago was really the birth of what we know as the gig economy, things like Uber and Lyft drivers and delivery, DoorDash, all of those types of things really kind of grew out of the 2009 financial crisis where there were a lot of jobs kind of went away, full-time jobs. There was a lot of disenchantment with getting another full-time job when you could easily be laid off again at the next, signs of the next crisis. We're seeing that now, 10 years later, we're seeing that now in different spaces of lots of individuals needing to rely on companies to employ them. Certainly, the companies are the ones hiring them, but not necessarily, a lot of individuals are not necessarily keen to go back to a full-time job when, we've all been kind of sold on full-time jobs are the source of stability and you get your benefits and your retirement and all this stuff. And yet we've seen it slowly go away over the years. And now I think some of those things are more myth than reality. And so you have this growing independent workforce that wants the freedom and flexibility to work when they want, how they want, earn as much or as little as they want, but they need help as far as some of that, the learning that they get from a company or some of the benefits, like I mentioned, like health, everything from health insurance to life and disability, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's a challenge right now, and there's a number of ways to solve it. My company CarrierGig is solving it in one way, but there's some growing needs and opportunities.
Very, very good points that you brought up there, Greg. So, Greg, based on your experience, because as you said, it's a theme and you've definitely found a way to position yourself as a subject matter expert in the area, ensuring that you have a podcast and then these different books that support the whole agile mindset. Could you maybe share with us, based on your experience and your exposure around this topic, maybe 2 or 3 principles that businesses must be guided by in order to be really agile? Or if they're just starting on this agile journey, what are 2 or 3 things that they need to really consider?
Yeah, I think a big one is that agility is something that needs to be embraced company-wide. Mm-hmm. So we've seen Agile really has its roots in manufacturing and software development. So we see most software development teams are using Agile. You might hear things about sprints and Scrum masters and things like that. There's a very formal Agile methodology that teams like that are using. I use Agile in a broader sense of the term, really, because some of those things apply a little bit less directly to other areas. But in order for a company to be agile, everybody's got to be bought into it. And that's top down. That's leaders embracing new ways of doing things. That's areas of companies that traditionally have not been as, agile, whether that's formal agile or big A agile or small A agile, as some people say. HR departments, for instance, not traditionally the most agile, and they're, for good reason, they're taught to be very compliance focused, and there's certain things that they need to always keep an eye on, but it's got to be company wide. So I mean that's definitely the first thing, is just leaders need to embrace it and make sure that the entire company is adopting it. Mm-hmm. I think the other part of this, and I go into more depth in my book, and it's kind of a theme, I guess, of most of my books and writing is there needs to be more focus on individuals and individual needs. And when you do that, it might sound counterproductive because, the companies and the shareholders need to get their, they need to get their value. But I believe there's a win-win when companies focus on making sure that individuals are happy, motivated, taken care of, that the companies reap huge benefits. When an employee is more motivated, they are more open to change. They're more open to adaptivity, all of those types of things. So I think it's sort of the inverse of the first point is like, it's got to start top down from leaders really driving the change, but the change has to be driven almost from thinking from the bottom up of what is it going to take for each individual to be more empowered and have more of what they need, and then they're going to be loyal. They're going to do what they can to support the company if you think like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we looked at two things: the individual, focus on the individual, and having it, push from top down, and leaders need to embrace it. And it needs to be a company-wide mindset. Totally agree with you. As it relates to digital experience, what are your views on, basically we're in this space now where everybody is pretty much online. I mean, if you're not online, I suppose you're missing out. People are definitely have moved their businesses or some parts of their business to online. How do you think we're going to adjust after hopefully things go back to what we used to think was normal in terms of that digital space? Will that trend continue, or do you think people want to return back to more face-to-face kind of experiences?
Well, I think there's always a desire to return to, there's nostalgia, right? I mean, I think everyone wants to return to some kind of things that they got used to and everything like that. And I think in many cases, there are certain kinds of businesses, I mean, restaurants, hotels, all of those things where you really can't recreate some of those experiences online, much as delivery has taken a lot of, had a lot of support from restaurants, for instance. But I do think that there has been enough time gone by with the pandemic, and we don't see that things are not quite over yet. I mean, there's positive signs of progress and everything like that, but there's enough time has passed where real habits have been formed. So if this was a 30-day thing, then people tend to go back to some sort of stasis or whatever. But, months and months have gone by in which, habits have been formed, new ways. I mean, brains have been rewired, let's just say, for a neuroscientist or whatever. But it's like enough time, new paths in our brains have been created. Let's just put it that way, where Zoom is like a normal thing as opposed to kind of an awkward, like, oh, do we have to, we can't get everybody in the conference room, like Zoom meetings are now normal, and stuff like that. So, I think where possible, there is going to be a return to that. But, I think the positive side of all of this, we've learned to do things a lot more efficiently in many ways. I mean, I personally spent hours and hours driving to meetings and doing all sorts of things where, when I had local things, at least, spending all that time, traveling, where now, I get on a Zoom call and it's easier, and you learn how to connect with people in a different way. It's certainly different, but I think that we can embrace some of the efficiencies that we've learned how to do, and I think it's forced technology to become better, and it was inevitable that it was going to happen. But all these tools that we use, like it's it's forced some other things, some innovation in other areas that we're just kind of lagging, and I guess to answer your question, it's a mix, right? Some things will go back, but I think some things may not, and maybe that's for the better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really, really do. So, Greg, could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely cannot live without in your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to from a business standpoint. I mean, I think it just comes down to analytics and having a good way to measure and get feedback. So it's if I were to choose one, that might be a little bit tough. But I mean, obviously we're my company's it's an online platform, and so using tools like Google Analytics and our CRM and stuff like that. I mean, we just couldn't. We are completely dependent on the feedback that we get from our customers, and because we deal in part of our customer base is really a volume base. We can't simply talk to a statistically significant sample on a regular basis. So really relying on those analytics helps us make a better product and a better company.
Amazing. Could you share with us maybe one or two books that have had the biggest impact on you? It could be a book that you read recently, or maybe a book that you read a very long time ago, but it still has had a great impact on you.
Yeah. So I mean, one that immediately comes to mind is it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and it's just by Ben Horowitz, and this is my CarrierGig is my first. It's not my first company that I started, but it's my first startup. So product-based company, and just some of the stories. I think the idea that there isn't a prescriptive set of guidance for every single problem that a leader is going to face, and so just kind of embracing that, kind of like what I was saying earlier of. Like, you've got to just embrace being uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean you have to love it. I don't think anyone loves being uncomfortable, but you have to be comfortable with that idea that if you're not uncomfortable, then there might be other problems going on. It's not just a relief. So I thought that was a refreshing take on that.
Okay, all right. So we will have the link to that book in the show notes for this episode. So if any of our listeners want to tap into that, whether through Audible or actual ebook, they can definitely tap into it, or even buy the physical copy. Now, Greg, could you share with us maybe something that you're working on right now, something that you're really excited about? It could be something that you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I've always got another book in the works. So it's I just the Agile Workforce is actually my 7th book, and so I just kind of set a personal goal to finish one a year. It keeps me learning. It's one of the biggest ways that I myself learn is just doing research for my own writing, and it forces me to talk to people in targeted conversations and stuff like that. So I just released another book, but I'm already on to the next one, which is going to focus a lot more on leadership's role in agility and things like that. So I've talked with a number of leaders of large organizations already, interviewed them for my podcast, other things like that, and going to be compiling things into another book, and hopefully maybe in a year's time I can join your show again and share.
Yeah, that would be awesome for sure. All right. Our listeners listened to this episode and they were really excited and pumped about what it is that you shared with us, all the great nuggets that you shared about agility, and also the opportunities to be exposed to the content that you have out there, whether through your books or actually tuning into your previous podcast episodes or upcoming ones. If they wanted to connect with you further, where can they find you online?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I would say you just search for Greg Kihlström. Please mention that you heard me on the show, and I'd be happy to connect and have some conversations.
Great. Now, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to that quote or saying? It kind of helps to get you refocused and just get you back on track. Do you have one of those?
I do. I don't know who it can be attributed to, but it's probably gotten me out of trouble. That it's a hypothetical because you never know what the other side of the decision is. But it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so I often refer to that and tell my employees or partners or whatever to think on that. And sometimes you still go ahead and do it, and sometimes you don't. But it's something to consider.
All right. So just because you can doesn't mean you shouldn't, correct? Or doesn't mean you should?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. We'll have that there for our listeners in this episode as well. Well, Greg, thank you so much for hopping on today with us and sharing great insight as it relates to agility and being flexible and embracing that mindset and just thinking about where we are today versus where we're coming from versus where we are going as a society, in our different organizations across different industries, and pretty much how we can integrate and have more meaningful and quality interactions that we will be actually exceeding our customers' expectations on a consistent basis. So we really appreciate the time that you shared with us today.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. So guys, just want to remind you, you can hop onto Facebook and join our private Facebook group at Navigating the Customer Experience Community, or follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. Thank you for listening to Navigating the Customer Experience. If you'd like to connect with us even more, please feel free to hop onto Facebook and join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. And of course, feel free to follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.